Is the grass actually greener on the other side? I'm curious how the Duke basketball transfers from a year ago are faring thus far this year. Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on Friday, December 27th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We're enjoying the holidays this time of year with slow weeks on the Duke athletics calendar. The 31st, we'll see Duke basketball back in action. Of course, we've still got Duke football set to play Ole Miss in the Gator Bowl next week coming on January 2nd as well. But on today's show, I want to talk about the transfers from last year's squad now that we're a ways into the new college basketball season. Was the grass greener for those guys who made those decisions to leave the Duke basketball program? A parting of ways, if you will, between the coaching staff and 7 scholarship players from last season. We'll dive into that and so much more with our good friend Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. And a special shout out to all of our everydayers out there. Want to take some time to shout you guys out for the support that you've had so far throughout the course of the season, continuing to grow Locked On Blue Devils to what it is. So thank you again for your support. Share these videos with your friends, and let's keep growing this Locked On Blue Devils community by subscribing to the podcast. So here he is. It's Kevin Connelly joining us on today's program. And Kevin, 2 straight days that I've got you on the show here. Grateful for the time as always. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well, JJ. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, look, I want to get into these transfers for the Duke basketball team from last season. It's something we talked about a lot once the season came to a close. And actually, here around the holidays time, it was a conversation I had with my dad. So a shout out to him for even putting this idea in my head. But for a lot of Duke basketball fans, they may be curious, how are things going for guys who made the decision to go elsewhere after last season? Big picture, when we look at what took place, to refresh everyone once again, Duke saw 7 players enter the NCAA transfer portal. They saw Ryan Young run out of college eligibility. They saw Jared McCain head off to the NBA draft along with Kyle Filipowski. And then also Duke had just 2 players coming back in Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor. So from the 2023-2024 Duke team to this 2024-2025 Duke team, a lot of new faces, a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most startling point, was that there was only 2 guys returning from last year. And I think when you look at things, I mean, yes, you knew you had a star-studded freshman class coming in, but I still think there was some trepidation in why are so many players opting to leave and enter the transfer portal instead of staying, and some who proved that they could be at least a valuable contributor off the bench. So, but as you said, the grass might not always be greener on the other side. And I think when you look at some of these transfer portal decisions, it's not always one-sided. It very well much can be a combination of both parties coming together and saying it might be time for a new chapter.
Okay, so let's look at it. Let's talk about these guys that have made the decision to leave Duke, and maybe in some ways, as we talked about, Duke and the coaching staff, John Shire being the head honcho there, a part of these discussions, and very well could have been like, you know what, maybe it is best for us to move on with those things. So 7 guys left. We're going to kind of go in a random order as we discuss these players who have left and found new homes. But we'll start with a guy that is so strange to see playing a college basketball game and not wearing a Duke uniform after 4 years with the Duke Blue Devils. He had 1 year left of eligibility remaining thanks to COVID-19. That gave him that extra year back. And, of course, we're talking about Jeremy Roach, who made the decision to head to Texas in Waco and play for the Baylor Bears. Again, we've got a photo here displayed on the screen. I'm not used to the green on him, Kevin. It just kind of looks wrong to not see him with Duke written across his chest there. But Jeremy Roach playing college basketball elsewhere.
He is, and he's having a pretty good season so far, averaging just about 13 points per game. He had his signature moment, if you will, against Baylor with a double overtime buzzer beater down in the Bahamas against St. John's. And this is a Baylor team that I think is really good. They've had some ups and downs in the non-conference play. They've had to sustain a couple of injuries, but I think if this team gets on the court and is healthy throughout conference play and into March, I think this is a Baylor team that could really make some noise with Jeremy Roach leading things as the point guard.
He's been fun to watch throughout the course of his entire career. I think for a lot of people, they talk about, wanting to be a true point guard and get that experience on the ball, and Baylor's kind of allowed him to do that. But in so many areas, Duke was kind of shying away from that last season. Still, when I turn on Baylor games, the very first thing I notice right away, Kevin, is you get Jeremy Roach to that free throw line, kind of mid-range jumper spot there at the elbow. It's money pretty much every single time.
Yeah, he still has some of those vintage Jeremy Roach tricks in his bag that we saw at his time at Duke. But kind of, the big thing going back to a reason why he entered the transfer portal is he wanted to be going back to a primary point guard role. And I don't know if his necessarily is that primary point guard. I think Baylor still uses him a little bit off the ball. Now he is averaging close to 5 assists per game.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's that true primary point guard that he thought he was going to be once he left Duke. But certainly it seems like things working out for him. I think he actually came back to Duke during the offseason, maybe for the K Academy. So got a degree from Duke. So still a member of the Duke Brotherhood, although he's finishing up his college eligibility down at Baylor.
Okay, so next, countdown to craziness, MVP, Hall of Famer, just superstar in so many ways. Of course, having fun talking about Christian Reeves, who left Duke after 2 seasons playing for the Blue Devils. He ends up within the ACC playing down at Clemson. What's interesting to look at with Christian Reeves so far this season, Kevin, he has played in every single game for Clemson. However, he's not playing a ton, averaging just 6 minutes per game, 1.4 points, 1.3 rebounds. But at least he's out there playing in every single game. So in so many ways, it kind of made sense that Christian Reeves made the decision to move on from his Duke playing days.
Well, yeah, I certainly get that. And I guess you certainly take the glass half full that he's playing. Yeah. Playing with very little impact, as you kind of said, less than 2 points and 2 rebounds per game. So I think for Christian Reeves, the hype was there. Kind of you looked at his size and was a lower rated recruit, if we're being honest. I think he was a 3-star recruit, might have been a top 200 or top 150 kid. So he wasn't exactly a top 20 kid that just didn't pan out. So there was still a lot of development there. And even when you look at a school like Clemson, who you can make an argument for the second or third best team right now in the ACC, not really making an impact on them. So you wonder if maybe, obviously, there a lot goes into these players making their decisions out of the transfer portal, but maybe if he should have gone to even a lower level school, lower level conference of a school to get more minutes, and then eventually try to transfer back up and provide minutes for a team like a Clemson or a major power conference team. But right now, I don't think many in the Duke universe are thinking about Christian Reeves and what he's done at Clemson over these first couple of weeks of the season.
Still such a big frame that he's working with, 7'2", 250 pounds, the sophomore, because he redshirted 1 year for the Blue Devils. He plays for Clemson. We'll see if he continues to make an impact. February 8th is kind of the day to watch when Duke takes on Clemson. That'd be the one opportunity for Christian Reeves to go up against the Blue Devils in a matchup there. All right, we'll step aside. We've got a couple of more players to talk about that entered the transfer portal for Duke after last basketball season. That's here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today, brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Did you know that Rocket Money can help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. for me, one of those best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore. I've also already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, so we'll keep moving forward here. Kevin Connelly's here with us from Ball Durham. We're talking about these transfers for the Duke basketball team and what to make of their new landing spots, how they have fared thus far this season, and so much more. Kevin, again, 7 players made the decision to walk away from Duke, a mutual decision in so many ways. Because, again, to reiterate for people, wouldn't be surprised at all if, 10, 15 years from now and off the record, John Schreier probably won't publicly throw things out there right now. But if there was some kind of talking from the Duke side of things, it's like, well, maybe you need to move on somewhere else.
No, yeah, and that happens. It's a conversation every coach in America has with their players. I think it gets a lot more notice when it's at a school like Duke and other schools like North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky. But it feels like when players transfer from Duke for whatever reason, even though we're in this day and age, it gets a little bit more publicity than other programs.
So as we move forward, we already talked about Jeremy Roach and we already talked about Christian Reeves, their decision to leave the Blue Devils. Let's keep this going. Again, we got 7 guys to get through here. Jaden Schutt leaves Duke after 2 seasons, plays for Virginia Tech now. Everydayers within the Locked On Blue Devils world knows how much I adored Jaden Schutt as a basketball player. Love the guy. I thought he was awesome. An outside sharpshooter for the Blue Devils who just did not get much run opportunity at all for Duke. The defense was lacking in so many ways. His body certainly could use some work, but he lands in the ACC, a heralded recruit, top 75 player within his class, and ends up playing for Virginia Tech. And, man, I'll say this. He's been playing a whole lot for the Hokies.
Yeah, he has about 30 minutes per game, started 12 of them, averaging about 9 points per game, and he gets a chance to come back to Cameron New Year's Eve when Virginia Tech plays Duke. So I think Jaden Schutt probably a little bit under the radar right now because Virginia Tech is not a very good ball club at the moment, but certainly good for him that he is playing more in the ACC and still kind of showing that he can shoot the ball, shooting about 37% from three-point range. So another guy probably flying under the radar because he's not making a major impact on a major team like a Jeremy Roach, but certainly seems like he's found a home where he can play a lot more at Virginia Tech.
The outside shooting, that's what it is for you. When you look at him, I mean, that's kind of, I think for everybody, what really jumps out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, almost identical field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. When you look at the stats, I think he's only taken 20 more field goal attempts than 3-point attempts. 96 field goals. 20 of them have come from 2-point range. 76 of them have come from 3-point range. So an exclusive 3-point shooter for Virginia Tech.
And you talk about taking advantage of your opportunity to play. How about this? I just did some numbers reminding myself of what exactly it was like for Jaden Schutt for the Blue Devils. The most he ever played for Duke was back his freshman season in just a riveting game that Duke had against Maryland Eastern Shore, Kevin, where he played 19 minutes for Duke. One time he played 19 minutes. His second most ever was 13 minutes in a game for the Blue Devils. The fewest he's played this season for Virginia Tech is 22. So if you just look at that alone and getting an opportunity to get your cardio in and run and be out there on the floor playing, very, very clearly he's made the right decision.
No, he has. And good to see him back on the floor from injury after redshirting last year and kind of that little drama at the beginning of the season. So, again, seems like he's found himself a nice home.
All right, let's go forward with a couple of more players here for the Blue Devils. You mentioned Jaden Schutt staying in the ACC. A couple of more guys find themselves in the Atlantic Coast Conference as well. TJ Power at Virginia, Jalen Blakes at Stanford. I want to get to Blakes in just a moment here, Kevin, but it's been a tough showing so far for TJ Power at UVA. You and I have talked about him a little bit over these last few weeks, just on the side and whatnot, and it's been tough to watch there for TJ.
Yeah, his Virginia program kind of in disarray, was kind of left in the kind of behind the eight ball when Tony Bennett calls it quits and retires a couple of weeks before the season. Miami kind of going through that now. Jim Larinaga
Yep.
retiring a couple of days ago in the middle of the season. So not to make excuses for TJ Power, saying he would make his 3-pointers if Tony Bennett was the head coach. But it has been tough. Everything you kind of hear is that he does perform well in practice, but doesn't translate over to the game. So I think TJ Power, kind of an example of a player who played really well in the AAU circuit, rose up the recruiting rankings, but just hasn't come to fruition in college.
23% from three-point range this season for TJ Power. Certainly, he wishes that number would improve. He's a guy who was getting a good bit of run at times throughout his Duke career, but when you look at what Duke is at this season, could you forecast an opportunity for TJ Power on this year's Duke roster? Looking at the team right now, man, I don't know where he would even get those minutes there. So I still think this probably was the right decision for him.
Yeah, I don't see a spot for him on this team's roster at all, especially given how much he struggled this year. So yeah, that's something I can't really see right now.
All right, looking at the schedule here, trying to remind myself from UVA, they played Duke on February 17th, but that one is in Charlottesville. So TJ Power does not return to Cameron Indoor this season. Jalen Blakes is an incredible story. Getting his Duke degree for the Blue Devils, he and Jeremy Roach are the only players who could say that they have both played for Mike Krzyzewski and John Shire. He had a lot of really fun moments throughout his Duke career, had some back-to-back 17-point game outings for the Blue Devils, stepping up at that guard spot. He goes out, he's an academic weapon, and ends up at Stanford now after holding on to his Duke degree, and he is playing a ton for the Cardinal, and he's making a massive impact.
No, he certainly is, and I think it's a good landing spot for him. You mentioned the academics and kind of been able to elevate those numbers, because if you look at Stanford's non-conference schedule, haven't really played anybody and suffered losses to teams like Grand Canyon and Cal Poly, and then kind of the one big school that they played was Oregon and got blown out in that game. So I think for Jalen Blakes, he did land at a good spot. He'll have a chance to impress in the ACC, and certainly for him, his future is very bright beyond basketball. And I think another guy who earned a Duke degree, was a really good Blue Devil when he was there, and now just getting the chance to shine on a different stage out on the West Coast, continue his educational pursuits, and still get a chance to play ACC basketball. So certainly good for him, and I think that was a good landing spot, and it seems that for both academic-wise and basketball-wise, he landed at a perfect spot.
Yeah, dude, I love it. I mean, he started every game this year for Stanford. He's playing 32 minutes a game for them, shooting 33% from three-point range, 48% from the floor. He's averaging 15 points a game. I mean, you can't help but feel super happy for Jalen Blakes. He's always a part of the Brotherhood. He's got his Duke degree, as we said. He was a part of the Final Four team and had some really fun moments for Duke basketball as well. All right, we'll step aside. A couple of big faces that we want to talk about from Duke that made the decision to transfer after last season. A couple of more to go when we continue with our pal Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham here in just a moment on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right, FanDuel is here, and the NFL playoffs are almost here. It's not too late for you to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Fun game we got to see last night between the Seahawks and Bears. We've got 3 games coming up on Saturday. That's tomorrow, and then a full slate on Sunday as well before we get into the final week of the NFL regular season. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points will each team score. It's so much thrilling. Look for Adam Thielen to end up in the end zone this weekend for the Panthers when they take on the Buccaneers. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has other bets like we talked about, how many points are scored, who's scoring touchdowns, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, last few moments here on today's episode of the program. Again, Kevin Connelly is here with us. We're talking about whether or not the grass was greener on the other side for Duke players that transferred away from the team last year. 7 of them playing college basketball this year elsewhere. The last 2 to highlight are Mark Mitchell, now with Missouri, Shawn Stewart with Ohio State. Let's start with Shawn Stewart, Kevin, a guy that his leaping ability is phenomenal. He had so many great dunks throughout his days as a freshman playing for Duke. Had a big one this past weekend at Madison Square Garden in Ohio State's upset victory over Kentucky. What have you thought of Shawn Stewart so far with the Buckeyes?
Well, I think for Shawn Stewart, and at this point in his career, and the stats back it up, he's a quintessential role player. He's really athletic. He doesn't shoot the ball really at all from three-point range. I think he's only attempted 1 this season for Ohio State, didn't attempt 1 last year for Duke. He still struggles at the free throw line, but he's a guy that's going to come on the floor and provide you energy, try to provide you a spark, play really hard, run end-to-end extremely well. And like you said, a big-time dunk against Kentucky in Madison Square Garden, he can provide that type of energy for you. So I think that kind of would have translated to many different places around the country had he opted to transfer there, but he goes to Ohio State, and maybe if he stays there for a couple of years, he can develop into a more consistent starter. I know he has started 11 games for Ohio State, but when you start 11 games and you're only averaging about 17 minutes per game, you could still be a role player in the starting lineup, not necessarily coming off the bench. So I kind of think that's where Shawn Stewart is still at in his career.
Yeah, still has to make sure as just a young sophomore, you stay out of foul trouble there in the post. That can kind of take you off the floor in so many ways. Ohio State played Auburn a few weeks ago, and against Janai Broome, he did pretty much everything. Had a 20-point, 20-rebound game against Shawn Stewart in that front line for Ohio State. Fortunately, Duke was able to knock off those Auburn Tigers for us, but that's kind of how Stewart has fared in those major games so far this season. And to remind people, in so many ways, Shawn Stewart was thought to come back to Duke for his sophomore season until the Blue Devils started talking with Malik Brown out of the transfer portal from Syracuse. He makes the decision to come over, and the timing just matched up perfectly with Shawn Stewart making the decision to head elsewhere. I don't blame Shawn Stewart for making that decision. I'm also, Kevin, really, really in love with the fact that Duke was able to land a player like Malik Brown.
No, certainly. I think Malik Brown fits this roster a lot better than Shawn Stewart would have. But I think I will add to your point that he was probably the most surprising of all the transfers to leave Duke this past offseason.
Okay, so then the last guy we want to highlight, a player that made an impact for the Blue Devils, starting nearly every game he played for the 2 years that he was a part of the Duke basketball program on John Shire's very first ever recruiting class as a head coach. It's Mark Mitchell, who's now playing for the Missouri Tigers in the SEC. Another guy that it's kind of hard to picture what exactly his fit would look like on this Duke basketball team, given his skill set, but a player that's mightily featured for Missouri and getting tons of opportunities to play.
No, he is, but I still think he has the same tricks he did when he was at Duke. He's a good defender, can still shoot the three-point ball, shooting 21%, and still struggles at the free throw line, shooting 58%, which if that continues throughout the season would be a career low. So there's still a lot of gaps in his game, but so far for Missouri, a team that I think is going to maybe fly under the radar a little bit in the SEC. They are 10-2. They do have a big-time victory over Kansas. We'll see how they compete in a really loaded conference in the SEC this year. But Mark Mitchell seems like he has found a little bit of a home, and I think he's also a player that needed just a fresh start and kind of had to leave Duke and begin his career kind of elsewhere.
Fresh start he's getting for Missouri. We'll see how they're able to fare moving forward and that sort of thing. Good to kind of check up and check in on these players now that we've got a few days off for Duke basketball before they're back in action on December 31st. And once again, Kevin, maybe this is a bit of the norm, as much as we hate to say that, but until kind of more legislative things come into play with the transfer portal, with NIL and college athletics, I think we could be set up for so much roster turnover. Every team experiences it. Duke just didn't experience it at all after Shire's first year And then this past year, man, we had to say goodbye to a ton of players.
Yeah, it was from not experiencing anything to the most extreme of experiencing it. So, but no, it's this day and age in college sports, not just college basketball, happens in college football, happens in college baseball, happens all over the place. So it's just something you have to adapt to. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of coaches get out of the game, those older coaches and these younger coaches who are becoming head coaches like John Shire. If you want to stay in the sport, you're going to have to adapt to it. So that's all. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. Just NIL just kind of trumps everything right now.
Okay, to wrap up our show this week and wrap up the show here today, Duke basketball players are getting back into town, and now they're going to start the ramp-up process once again to get back in play on New Year's Eve, taking on Virginia Tech, a 4:30 tip-off, so a bit of an earlier afternoon start within the week here for Duke, but good, Kevin, for the guys to have had the opportunity to go back home, see their friends and family for the Christmas and holiday season. Now they're getting back into Durham, locking back in for a stretch run here in ACC play. No,
they are, and I think two of their tougher games that you're going to play in the ACC come pretty early. I think I'm really interested by this SMU team. They're 10-2 overall. They picked up a victory in the league against Boston College when they went on the road and scored 103 points. Now, that might not be that much because it is Boston College, and they're not that great either. But when you look at their losses on the road against Butler and against Mississippi State, two quality teams, Butler, a very difficult place to play, and Mississippi State out of the SEC. We kind of just talked about how big, how great the conference has played overall this season. And then right after that, they host Pittsburgh, who very well could be one of the second best teams in the league as well. So after the game against Virginia Tech, two back-to-back games, which could be two of the toughest Duke plays in the conference this year.
John Shire highlighted it as well. The spring semester for the Blue Devils doesn't start academically at Duke University until January 8th. So now that the players are back on campus, in so many ways, they're kind of living the NBA life where your only focus right now is basketball. There are no courses that you're in. You're in the middle of a season, game in, game out, rehab, taking care of your body, in practice and film sessions, and then getting to compete out there on the floor. A little bit of a taste of what many of these Duke players will get to experience once they head off to start playing professional ball.
No, it is. And when you look at the students probably not coming back till early January, Virginia Tech, a team where Cameron will still be full, the crazy section will still be packed, but you still won't have that student-like atmosphere. But that's okay. You should be able to handle Virginia Tech at home without them. But I think you said they start January 8th, new semester. So that means everyone's going to be there January 7th when Pittsburgh comes into town. So you should get a pretty raucous environment for that game.
All right. Tell us about Ball Durham, Kevin, and how people can support you.
Yep, you come read us over at Ball Durham every single day. Just balldurham.com into your web browser, and then follow us on social media at ball_Durham.
Thanks for the time. We'll do this again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that wraps up another week here on the program today. Super excited for what Duke basketball has coming for them in 2025 and in the rest of the ACC schedule here. And then, again, is the grass greener on the other side for some of those Duke basketball transfers that we got to talk about on today's show? Comment down below what you thought. Leave us questions for the Mailbag Monday, and look forward to talking to you again next week. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you on Monday. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.